There. Yeah. Once that prompt comes on, I think that means we're definitely live. So
I
we
think we
are
are live.
back. Yeah. It's Wednesday afternoon.
It's Wednesday afternoon.
We're definitely live. So far back. Yeah.
Can hear us.
Yeah. Okay. So I wonder if I can edit the post here. I can't edit the post on
Okay, we are live. Maybe we should
Facebook.
focus. Hope everyone is great. It's snowing here in Michigan. Actually, today is a snow
You,
day.
you
So
know, oh, it's just the kids were home today.
they are
Oh,
home, yep.
that's
So
that's I'm gonna try
they're all
that.
outside though, which is fun.
Oh, looks like I can tag you. And I'll tag
James, it's okay. Let's just sorry if you're following. We should be, we had technical difficulties. And James doesn't want to abandon. He is someone who perseveres. So.
I tagged you, so it should appear on your page. We'll cross our fingers. We'll see what happens. Okay, so you picked out the topic for today, so I'm going to give the floor to you to begin.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor, but it's such a wide subject. Today, I wanted us to talk about trauma and adverse childhood experiences and all of that. Because it was, I think, our most watched episode.
So far.
Episode number 4 of our podcast. And today it's number 102, right?
Yeah.
So
I actually watched it. I rewatched it last night.
You did?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, there is so many things to say about that I thought it would be just better to have a conversation about it, because I don't want this to be like a monologue, and I also don't want it to be like a class. It's not. So if we keep it as a conversation, I think it is going to be better, and it's a podcast. But what I can say to launch our conversation is that I think the podcast had a lot of views because everyone can resonate with it. Everyone can resonate.
Okay, that's really, yeah. And I my experience in listening back to it was like, oh, these are some stories that I told that, yeah, these are really powerful stories that stuck with me. And you told a couple too that were, it's like, wow, these are really powerful stories that shaped who we are.
Yeah, right? And and what you're saying and what we were saying is really that whatever experience we have between 0 to 5 years old is really going to define how we live the rest of our life, right? How we live out our life. And that has been backed up, by psychology, by neuroscience, by doctors, and especially for children, they're what they call neurocircuitry or biochemistry, of a growing child is very much defined, attuned with the person who is giving care to him, mostly the mother. And I feel like our society, knows about the big trauma. When we talk about trauma, we think right away of trauma with a big T, like, something very bad that happened to you. You've been assaulted, in any ways, or you've been in a big car accident or things like that. And so we focus on those, and we've all heard about PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, that is related to those big trauma with a big T, but we don't really talk about, or we don't pay as much attention to the small traumas, what we call
the little things, the little things.
Yes.
Okay.
But what is defining the rest of our life, all of our life, is not the big thing most of the time for most of us. It's really those little traumas, and it's all rooted, in the attachment.
So I have a question about that for us to think about then. So you said it's from 0 to 5 years old. And what I'm wondering is, I know for me, when you said that, I thought, well, how much do I really even remember from 0 to 5 years old? And it's like little
Yes.
bits.
Actually,
And I don't, yeah.
you don't remember, but remember what I said, the growing child, the way your brain grows, the way you develop, the way you've attached to your parents between 0 and 5, it determines how you act the rest of your life. So
Mm.
it's what is a trauma is not what you remember, is what
It's
weren't
the way
there.
you've been programmed, whether or not you remember it.
Yes, no, not even the way you were programmed, but how your brain has grown. I just give
Okay.
an example. If you were a child, you were a baby, and your parents let you cry at night.
Mm-hmm.
You cried because a baby cries, a baby needs the warmth of the mother to feel safe and secure. But like it happened to me with my oldest son. The doctor said, he's 2 months now, you need to go back to work. So you just leave him in his room. The first night he's going to cry, he's, life out, but you don't go.
Mm-hmm.
And then by day 2 or day 3, you will see that he will sleep through the night and you will be all ready to go back to work. That was awful. I did it, right? And what happens within the child's brain is a feeling of abandonment. And then the child will learn to cope with it and find a way to cope with it. That's why after night 2 or 3, the child is going to sleep, okay? But it's not that it's something good for the child. The child has gone through a huge fear, right? And a child cries because he's scared. He needs a mom to reassure and love and give warmth.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we are not there, I wasn't there. So my son was very afraid and feel abandoned. And then he eventually found a way to calm down. And then I was able to go to work.
Mm-hmm.
But the damage that it did in the brain, first, the way the brain grows, and just probably some insecurities he still has today, and some other ways, that combined with a lot of things, because we talked about in the episode 4, the needs, the irreducible needs of children, what they really need, the four S's, to be safe, to be secure, to be loved, and all of those needs. If they are not, if we don't give it to the child, everyone, we learn to adapt. And then we grow up with relational issues, or with addiction issues, or with when we're super sensitive, can we make friends? When we say, oh, I'm an introvert, or I'm an introvert, every possible way we can relate it to the way we were attached to our parents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a nice part. That's the first trauma. And that's the trauma with a small T.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about what if we talk about before, when you were 5 or before, is there anything that comes to your mind that you remember?
I do remember some things. I remember the separation with my dad at some point. I think I
Okay.
was 4 or 5. I remember a big separation right before I started going to school, to kindergarten.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
I remember I was very attached to my I don't have a lot of memories of me small being to, be with my mom, but I do remember wanting to have that attachment to my dad. And I remember, that he wasn't, at some point you go to school and then you're not a baby anymore. So I remember I used to, when he was having his nap, and I go and, jump on him, do his hair, with my siblings, and all of that I stopped doing. So I kind of remember a rupture, in the way I related to him. And then, some other things that happened later. But between 0 to 5, I don't remember much. But I remember how that the result of how I was later at school is a result of how I felt, you know, the way some things that happened, the way I related to them, and even the way I am today,
Yeah.
you know, in my
Yeah.
relationships, how I relate to people.
Yeah.
Because Dan Siegel, you know, he's the one who he has a Mindset Institute, and he's the one who came up with the interpersonal neurobiology studies. So he, you know, put together 9 fields, you know, anthropology, sociology, math, psychology, all of those, like 9 fields, and studied everything. And he said, well, the person, we're not individual people, you know, we function in relationship with others. So the way we relate to others from our childhood has an impact on who we become and who we are later. So yeah, those are the, you know, really the first traumas when we are young, and everything that happens without knowing it. And you know, for me, it's a big subject because especially for young moms and the way we raise today's children, you know, I feel like when you look at our society and, you know, you hear left and right that kids' suicide is going up, or ADHD. You know, there is a big, and Dan Gabor Mate, the trauma expert that I am really specializing in. He wrote a book called Scattered Minds on ADHD, and he makes a point of ADHD being related to attachment, right? And today, all the kids, most of the kids, there is 20-25% of the kids who have ADHD, and we have to medicate them. And they say that 80% of the autoimmune diseases touch women, you know? So women also suffer a lot from trauma and from things that happen, and that they, you know, they keep within their body. And I remember talking about that book, the body keeps a score.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
the fact when our body said no, you know, when we are sick, when we get sick, and when our sickness is related to our emotional state, you know, the relationship between the mind and the body. And yeah, so there is so much to say about it. You know, I've read books and books, but I wanted us to you know, really have a conversation about do we, you know, when things are not going well in our lives, you know, when we are depressed, when we have anxiety, really to be curious and know what's going on, what's my story, you know, really try to make sense of our past, or make sense of just who we are. You know, you and I, you know, being coaches, we talk about being awareness,
right.
checking in with ourselves, what's happening in us. And when we pay attention to those little things and we accept to do the work, well, we learn a lot. And what we learn is that the foundation of it all is when we were a child, right? So when we have that information, how can we pass it out to new parents, to, you know, for people to hear, for people to be happier, and for the world to be ultimately better.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm just thinking, well, what if some of these events in our lives are what we learn from? What if and I remember when I listened back to our episode 4, I was talking about the idea that we had the perfect parents for who we are. And maybe we have the perfect experiences for who we are. So that's interesting, but you're saying that maybe it's the responsibility of the parents to make sure that the children have experiences that are constructive and joyful only, and not experiencing trauma.
No, I think I'm hearing two things. You know, first, there is the way nature, made us, the way we are made, and our innate needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a child needs attachment with the mom. That's how, that's for effective growth and, growing to be healthy and happy and not being afraid of the world, not being afraid of others, and being open and seeing the world as a beautiful place to be. For that to happen, we need to have secure attachment. Okay. And if our parents are fully available for us, our mom is available, I have a story with my second son who kind of was being diagnosed with ADHD. And I know, when I go back to the story of his birth, what I'm learning makes totally sense, right? So there is that. There is a way who we are today because of what happened to us, because of our story, okay? And then there is whatever happened to us, lead us to who we are today. Like if I take myself, I've had 3 lives, to kind of make it short. And everything wasn't fantastic. Everything wasn't wonderful and joyful. But because of who I am today, I like to say, I will not remove a single thing of what happened, because it all enabled me to be who I am today. So to answer to your question, yes, things that happen to us teach us something. And I'm pretty much happy about my life today. But for some people, the people who end up taking their own lives, we won't be saying the same thing about them, right? So I think adversity, or whatever it is that has happened to us, if we make sense of it, if we deal with it, is going to be our biggest lesson, our biggest motivation to move forward. But when we don't do the work, unfortunately, it doesn't end well. And I'm sure you and I have a lot of stories of people who are addicted and are down, and can't seem to be better. And we know people who have taken their own lives because it was too hard. They were never able to make sense of what happened to them and be resilient, and not only learn from it, but were able to even be a catalyst for greater change and greater results in their life.
That's a powerful question to ask. What happened to you?
Well, there is this book.
Yeah.
Oprah Winfrey wrote it with Bruce Perry, and Bruce Perry, he is a child psychologist and New York Times bestseller. He wrote several books, and one of his books, and I think I mentioned that last time, is What Happened to You. He said, when things happen to people, when you see someone acting weird or doing things, the question is not, are you crazy, or, but the question is, what happened to you? Because when you know the person's story, when you know what happened to the person, then you can make sense of it, And so, yeah, I agree. That's a powerful question. But, I was focusing on adverse childhood experiences, because it's crazy that it's been, and there is evidence, it's evidence-based, okay? Those books that I'm reading are evidence-based. It's just not examples or, little stories. It's evidence-based that whatever happened to us in childhood between 0 and 5 determine the rest of our life, determine our health, determines how we relate to people, whether we get cancer, we have cancer or not. Because for example, we say we all have cancer genes, but for example, all the women who have a breast cancer gene don't end up developing breast cancer. But when they study those who develop it and they look at their life, there you can make the correlations. There you start seeing patterns. and
Mhm.
making,
Mhm.
and understanding certain things. Yeah. They say that women, again, that when I saw that, I was very like, although even more motivated to keep doing the work I'm doing, when he said it's in Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal. And I've talked about this book again and again.
Mhm.
He explained that 80% of the autoimmune disease, these illnesses, they touch women because women are the emotional bearers of society. They bear the emotions of their children, and also of the husbands, and how when we don't have the support that we need, we end up being sick.
Mhm.
And it is proven by the fact that 80% of those illnesses touch women, right? And he gives examples after examples, studies after studies, also women who, after understanding it, get well, are so much better, just by being aware and, doing the appropriate changes,
Yeah.
how life evolved for them.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Good. What about experiences? I know last time when we talked about this in episode 4, we both talked about experiences that were past the age of 5. I talked about a couple of examples of me in junior high school, middle school. I was,
Yes, with your
11 or
mom, I
12.
remember that
And I
story.
think, and you were telling me a story about you in, was it first grade, second grade, something like that?
Yeah, my second and third grade teacher, or third,
Yeah.
the same, who traumatized me, who, yes, I'll let you finish your question, but yeah, I do remember that story that I shared.
Well, I guess the question would be, how much do those affect our experience of who we are? Or if we're even adults. So if something happens to you as an adult, and it could be like we were saying, like a major event, or it could be just a minor thing, maybe a comment that somebody makes to us offhand. How much does that affect? How much is
That becomes a resigning board. That becomes a resigning board. And Gabor Mate, I remember, when we say the word trigger, you said, "Oh, I was triggered." So what does that mean?
Okay.
That means that there was a seed, there was something that
So
was
something
there.
in the deep dark past of
Yes,
pre
yes,
pre
zero
5 years
five.
old. Okay.
That is amplified. That's why you're triggered.
Interesting.
That's because there's, and he said, well, some people will be like, yeah, but we have to leave the past behind. We don't need to go and dig in our past, etc. And Gabor Mate says, you don't need to go in the past. The past keeps showing up in your present. So
That's
if you
interesting.
want to deal with your present, you can just deal exactly with what's happening in your present, but that will take you to the story of what really happened. And until you've gone there and done that work and moved back, like they say, your inner child work, you will keep on having the same issues, and there are things out there. There is the internal family systems, there is somatic work that Dr. Peter Levine does. There is Gabor Mate himself. He has a compassionate what's the name? Compassionate understanding or something. He has like counseling works to do to kind of make sense of your past. But until sometimes we all say, I can't seem to get past this. I am always reactive to these kind of things. I am always triggered by this or that, or I always feel jealousy toward this person or another person, or I always feel insecure when somebody else is doing this, or I am always super hungry when I am feeling, worried, or, everything that we do, we can trace it back to what
So
happened.
you're saying this is stuff that happened in the years before we have a lot of definitive, well, not that memories were ever definitive,
Yeah,
but
in
before
the
we have
cells,
any memories at all that are conscious.
it's
So,
ingrained in the body, you
mhm.
know? So there is a lot of literature. The body keeps the score when the body says no. And, Awaking the Tiger, and so many books about that. But I mean, it's not an easy question. It's not an easy subject. It's not a favorite subject of people because it shows vulnerability. And, he even defined the word. We said we need to be vulnerable. And there is what's her name? Brene Brown, she talks, she's made
Yeah,
her
yeah,
work around
yeah,
vulnerability.
yeah.
And Gabor Mate says, what is vulnerability? Vulnerability just means talking about our wounds,
Mhm.
but somehow there is a shame or a guilt that has been woven around that experience of the past that we've buried in our head, or if we haven't buried it, that we're hiding. Okay. And we're
Mhm.
ashamed. When you and I talked about taming the shame in an
Yeah,
episode,
right, right.
right? Or being vulnerable and being an open book and not having secrets.
Yeah.
All of that is a work we are doing, that I am personally doing,
Mhm.
to be free, to live my most extraordinary life fully expressed, as I
Right,
like to
right,
say.
right.
And it is available to anyone, right?
Yeah.
Just to do like Joan of Arc, jump on your horse and go and face that thing that you're afraid of,
Mhm.
that happened before, get to know it
Mhm.
so you can tame it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with your permission, I'll share you a story that came up when you said from 0 to 5.
Yes,
And
please.
so, in the back of when we're talking, of course, in the back of my head, I start to think, well, what do I actually remember from that period of time? And there are only bits and pieces, maybe 2 or 3 incidents that I can actually put put a finger on and say, oh, I remember this. And of course, now I'm remembering it with who I am now. But in kindergarten, we had a toy called Lincoln Logs. And I don't know if you've heard of those. They were logs that were set up. It's sort of like what do you call it? Legos? It's like Legos, but it's logs that you build a log cabin with, right? So I made an airplane out of Lincoln Logs, and I'm flying around. And look at my plane! Look at my plane! And I won't say his full name,
He's
but
still friends with you.
well, we went to high school together and so on. But anyway, he comes and he knocks. I'm balancing all these logs. Look at my plane, and he knocks it out and knocks it down. And all the logs fall on the floor, and I'm very upset about that. And I said, "Well, what did you do that for?" And he said, "Well, if you give me any guff, I'm gonna come over here and I'm going to punch you in the face so hard that I'm going to knock your teeth down your throat."
Hmm.
And what that might mean for me is that it's not safe for me to express myself fully in terms of what I'm creating, because somebody's going to come and wreck it. And then if I complain about it, they're going to knock their teeth down my throat.
Do you feel like you've lived your life in such a way?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, it's an interesting realization that there was that, and I think I might have mentioned on one of our discussions about in 3rd grade where I was shamed by the teacher because of my
Yeah,
color
you're doing.
owl. So the message from that was it's not safe to express your creative truth. It's not safe to express your creative truth. And then probably the way I've lived my life from then on is like, it's okay for me to do it in private, but to make it public, it's not safe, because somebody's going to shame me for not doing it the correct way, not coloring between the lines, or somebody's going to destroy it And then if I protest, they're going to threaten me with physical
Wow,
harm. So it's kind of interesting that,
it's interesting.
and that's, and then I get wondering, well, what about all of the other stuff that happened to me that I don't remember, or are these pivotal moments like Matthew Dix, a man who wrote a book called Story, where they calls them 5-second moments. So are these 5-second moments where you have this realization and you look back on it, are those points of trauma?
Well, when you're talking about, I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about the word adaptation. So what I'm hearing is that because of what happens, you adapted. And I remember I loved that word, oh, I adapt easily, I adapt quickly.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized that adaptation is not that great because it makes you become who you are not. It makes you go against your
Oh,
innate
that's interesting.
nature.
Yeah.
It makes you, so usually what's interesting, the word healing, the word whole, being whole, return to wholeness. He said the Greek origin means healing. So to heal is to be whole again. So to go back to your wholeness, your truer nature, before the adaptation, before circumstances happened in your life that push you to wear a mask or to become or who you are not.
Right.
And then you suffer from that.
Yeah. So that's to go back to what we were talking about last week. So my project right now is to embrace my weird and get it out there and not worry about the mean boy who was going to knock everything out of my hands and then threaten to knock my teeth down my throat. So
Isn't that freedom to be who you are? Don't you feel lighter? Don't you feel good? And just by being you.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Wow.
Very nice. All right. Well, any final comments? It's a good conversation.
Let's continue the conversation. It's never, it's not a subject that is just not a subject and then we go on to something. It's, for me, it's what I'm dealing with every day. It's when I'm having conversations with people, I want to know them. I want to talk about them. I want to understand them. Getting to know them is know what happened to them when they were young. Why are they thinking the way they think? What's their vulnerability? What do they need to heal? What is it that still hurts? Why are they getting upset? Or so it's just getting to know people, understanding, those little traumas, those little things that happen or didn't happen, that for people to become whole. So the conversation continues.
Very nice. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.
You.
And if you want to listen to this again, you can check it out on YouTube. We're putting these up on YouTube on a regular basis. Or, of course, you can, if you didn't join us live, you can watch this on the replay. And
we can. It's on our Facebook pages, right? It's on both of our pages.
We'll have to check that out and see. But I think it worked. I think it worked.
We'll check that. But anyway, we'll be happy to be back again with you next week, Wednesday.
All right. Everybody have a fantastic afternoon.
Bye.
Bye.